Hello and welcome. Good evening, friends, to Lively Laura's Spirit Speak. Tonight, I have a very special guest. You may not recognize his name, but if you are from Moberly or the surrounding area, you are definitely going to recognize his voice. Mike Lear, he spent 19 years in radio, 14 at Quicks and Cress, and 5 at Missouri Net, almost 10 years at the House at the Capitol, and 15 years at Missouri State Penitentiary. That's incredible. Started his own podcast in 2020, Show Me Murder, which I'm a huge fan of, and I'm super excited to have him finally come sit down, hear about him and who he is, how he got started, and maybe uncover some more about MSP through his research. With that, we are going to bring in Mike, Mr. OG MSP. That's going to be the nickname.
I'll take
So
it.
tell us about you. What do you, where does Mike's story begin?
Well, let's see. You talked about Quicks and Cress Radio. I began about a block and a half from there. I actually grew up basically right next to the radio station, and I remember my brother living there or working there about 10 years before I did. Came to find out later in life I had a granddad in radio, so I guess it kind of runs in the family. Uh, but no, I grew up close to downtown Moberly. Wasn't one of the kids who was in a big hurry to get out of town. I always figured it, you go somewhere else, it's same stuff, different names. And so it wasn't until I had a job opportunity to work for Missouri Net that I finally left Moberly to take that. And as far as, MSP is concerned, I remember when that place closed in 2004, I was still working at Quicks. And I remember writing a piece about the prison and digging up a little bit of its history then, but I already knew then. I remember while I was writing the piece saying, man, I wish I could get in there just once. And of course, I didn't think, at the time, I didn't think it would ever happen. But when I moved to Jefferson City, Michael Joseph, who was part of a ghost hunting group, I don't remember where he lived at the time. I want to say he was in Columbia. He and I had communicated for 4 or 5 years and never met in person until I moved to Jeff City. And he was one of the folks involved in getting the ghost tours started at MSP. And more or less, they said, hey, we need a couple more guides, get your app in. And by the end of, by about 3 or 4 months of being an assistant, I was giving tours by the end of that year, and I've been a tour guide ever since.
Wow. So growing up, were you into history like you are now? Like, were you drawn to
yeah,
that aspect?
I remember enjoying it, and I remember enjoying learning about history in school, but somewhere along the line, I don't know if I just got too busy or, I say today, I always have so much sympathy for, I had some really good history teachers in school, and I know that several of them were just frustrated that they didn't have more time to cover material, or that they knew they were going over this. These kids learned this last year. We're rehashing the same material over and over and over again. Right. And every time you can only get so much of it in. So somewhere along the line, I think I kind of forgot that I enjoyed history as much as I do. And I remember I loved the History Channel back when it actually showed history programming, but that was about it for a long time. And when I started doing the tours again, I realized very quickly, I was fascinated by the paranormal and I loved doing the ghost tours, but I very quickly realized what I was really enjoying was learning the history of the place. And that's really what reignited it for me.
I was going to say, and you probably had some of those same history teachers that I did.
Yeah.
in high school. So bless their hearts.
Yeah. A couple of them really, a couple of guys were there just because they were coaching and they had to put them on the staff somewhere else. But a couple of those guys really took it seriously. And I remember a couple of them very well. Mike Barner is one who comes to mind.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say. I was like, Mr. Barner he was serious about the history. So
yeah.
In the beginning, you just answered my question. It was more so paranormal got you in the door at MSP, and then somewhere along the line, it kind of transitioned over to history, right? So you started doing the ghost tours. And I'm sure at some point they were like, okay, now we need people who want to do history tours. And you were like, okay, I think I'd rather do that, right? Because I know the last time we were at the prison together, you said, you steered kind of not completely away from paranormal, but more so the history.
Yeah, that's more or less what happened. I mean, we got to a point where I think I was just annoying the history guides enough that they wanted, well, at least if he's giving tours, he won't be taking ours. I say that in jest, but I did make it a point to take tours with all of the history guides, and that's really where my knowledge base began. And of course, I have to say, I get a little choked up, but we lost Mark Schreiber just a few months ago,
It's
and he's really the one who got certainly the tours as we know them today and the history as we know that place today. He's where that all began. And it's not to say that there wasn't anyone else, but he's really the guy who is responsible for those tours. And he became a good friend of mine. And it was an honor to be able to say that. But I'm sidetracking myself. But to get back to your question,
okay.
I'm notorious for that. Just ask my tour guests.
I told you I was going to let you steer most of it.
But yeah, it was probably 4 or 5 years. I kind of lose track of where the transition happened that I had been doing ghost tours, and then they more or less we had plenty of ghost tour guides, and we needed some history guides. And I think that they, people knew early on. I think even before I did, how passionate I was about learning the history of that place. So somewhere along the line, for a brief period, I did both, and I loved that. But I got to say, it's easier to do one than the other and still have a life. So
Well, I'm just going to tell you that right now. I don't have much fun, and I'm okay with that. Believe me. I
yeah,
mean,
I'm doing a lot of things that I love, but if I
exactly
was when I was doing both history and ghost tours, it was hard to have time for anything else.
anything. I can't even imagine. Mm-mm. Um. So, kind of before we dive completely into MSP, because I know that's going to be our big focus. What other paranormal tours, like what or investigations did you do? I know you did the brothel there in Moberly, but what
Mhm.
other ones had you done before you started at MSP?
Honestly, a lot of what I did before that, I can't give too many specific locations because a lot of it was private residences. I
Private.
wanted to
Mm,
be one of these people who traveled to Waverly, and I wanted to go to
mm,
Eastern State and Mansfield and I wanted to go to all the same places everybody else has gone and goes all the time. Valeska, um, but for various reasons, most of what I ever did was private residences. And then I did, as you say, I was privileged to get to investigate the Sycamore in Moberly. And I had a couple of interesting experiences there. Um, and I'm blanking on the name now, but there's a historic theater in Boonville that I got to go to a few years ago, and that was an interesting night as well. I can't say we maybe caught a whole lot, but it was just an interesting experience. Um, but that was most of what I did, and like anybody else, I think if they're honest about it, as a paranormal investigator, when you start off, I haven't met anybody yet who I'm convinced knew what they were doing from from the get go. Uh,
no.
we've all seen the TV shows, and we all have to question how reliable any of what is making it to our screen by the time we see it. How much is going on there,
Mm,
but that was my starting point, like everybody else, and it was just that and a fascination. I believe the house I grew up in had something going on in it,
mhm.
and so it kind of began there. And over the years, I kind of talked myself out of, oh, that was probably nothing. But as I got older and had other experiences and kind of re-examined what I remembered from my childhood, I think there was probably something to it.
We'll be right back.
You were talking about you were privileged to be able to do the Sycamore,
Sycamore, mhm.
and you were doing private residences mainly when you got
Yeah,
your start, and how people, if they probably didn't know what they were doing when they started, and I will absolutely agree with that. We didn't have a clue, and I
yeah,
cringe sometimes when I look back at some of our first investigations.
oh
I'm
yeah,
like, ooh,
and that may have been one of my challenges being a ghost guide at MSP for so long. Was I probably didn't always do the best job of restraining my skepticism with some of the folks who came in and thought every little thing was a ghost and everything they saw and so on and so forth. And I couldn't do it.
no.
There's I'm too quick to say, well, there's too many other things it could be. But
Exactly. You're quick to debunk and try to, yeah.
yeah.
All right, hold on real quick. I just want to make sure that we are not live because okay, good. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
No, I just want to make sure. All right, perfect. My heart fluttered for a minute. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, I know. I tell you.
But yeah,
So,
besides residences in the Sycamore, and I think I did a theater in Boonville here a few years ago. But I'm like anybody else. I want to get to the big sites too, and one of these days I'll get to do those things.
bucket list.
Yeah,
Bucket list
absolutely.
locations. I have them. I'm working on them. I mark maybe one off, one or two a year, but I'm gonna get there.
Yeah, gotta pace
That's
yourself.
the goal. That's right. So what's we're gonna fast forward. Now you're doing these things when you were at doing the paranormal at MSP. What do you think, looking back on all of those, is probably one of your most profound moments? And I know you said you've had so many that you should have journaled them and you didn't, but is there one that maybe sticks out in your mind more than the first one that pops up when you think, okay, looking back on my tours and my investigations?
There's actually, I'm blanking on one that I know I hope it'll come to me here in a minute, but one that I always think of was I hadn't been at MSP for maybe 3 months when we were doing an investigation. It was a private group. It was actually five. I remember it was 5 guys. 3 of them were essentially the crew, and the other 2 were brothers, one of whom was on the spectrum. And their whole deal, I don't know what to call it, but as I understood, they were shooting a documentary of these 2 brothers
Hmm.
traveling the country and going to, I don't think it was strictly his haunted sites, but I think it was just going to various sites across the country that were well known, famous, etc. And these other 3 guys were filming it essentially to be a documentary. I don't know whatever came of it, but I thought it was a great concept.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, one of the, I won't say it was the first ghost hunt I ever did, but it was one of the first, and at MSP. And so Michael Joseph, I mentioned a moment ago, I know he was working that night, and he was setting up gear in Forehouse, and I was helping him. And when our 5 guests arrived, one of the other assistants came back and said, "Hey, the guests are here. You should go meet them." So I'm walking basically from the back of Forehouse toward the front, and I knew we had 5 guests. So where are they? Looking for them, and I can see 3 of them in plain sight, just in front of the door where you come in that building. There was a blue pew, a blue bench that used to, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
where it is right now. I think it's in one of the cells now, but it used to run across the back of the seats where we seat the
Mm-hmm.
guests. And those 3 guys were sitting there. Later found out those were the crew. We're just sitting there in plain sight. Thought nothing, there's 3. Where's my other 2? And as I'm looking up, I want to say it was around cell 38 on the second level. As you're facing the front door on the right side, I see a guy standing there. And I don't know how long he was there, but I want to say it was a solid 15 or 20 seconds. And then he walked inside that cell. Okay, there's 4. Where's my other 2 guys? And by the time I reached the 3 guys at the blue pew, here, however long that was for me to walk the rest of that distance to them, here came the 2 brothers out of the stairwell. And of course,
Mm.
I turned to the first assistant I saw. I don't remember now who it was, and said, "Hey, I thought you said we had 5 guests." Yeah. Okay. Well, I just counted 6. Now, of course, nobody saw him but me. Nobody had their cameras out, et
Mm.
cetera, et cetera. But I always tell people I don't use the word apparition very often. In fact, that's the only thing that I have ever seen that I would call an apparition. He
Mm.
looked like if you were standing here in front of me, it looked like I'm looking at you now, is what I always tell guests. He wasn't transparent. He wasn't floating off the ground. It was a person. But it didn't hit me until that moment that he was wearing what very well could have been inmate pants from about the 70s or so. Had a stripe down the
Mm.
leg, or maybe it was the 50s when they had this dark
Mm.
stripe down the side of the leg. White sleeveless T-shirt, which did strike me as an odd choice, but I've never seen anything like it before or since. I do always laugh at one a couple of years ago. I was going around and auditing the other guides. I was recording every guide's tour for training for future guides.
Mm-hmm.
And Jenny, who actually, she reminds guests all the time, but she's kind of taken on her own, everything about her is unique, and she's kind of taken on her
Mm-hmm.
own tours, her own personality, but she reminds guests and me all the time that she trained under me. And if I listen close enough, I can still hear stories I used to, or the way I used to say things 7 years ago. She's still using some of that, which I take as I'm very flattered by that.
Compliment.
Yes, but I believe it was Jenny's tour I was auditing, and we were upstairs in housing unit 1, H Hall, the old women's unit, and I'm standing at the back of the group, just out of the way, and something pinched me on the butt, and there was no one behind me. And as I always like to tell people now, even though that we call that the women's unit, most of its life it held men, but I'm hoping it was one of the females. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that would just be my preference.
That's awesome.
But those come to mind, and then somewhere, and I had a hard drive crash on me a few years ago, but somewhere I had an MP. Maybe I've still got it backed up somewhere, an MP3 of something saying my name while I was in the gas chamber one night. Yeah.
How do people always ask that question? Have you had a spirit say your name, or how does that make you feel if you've heard that? And so, how did that make you feel? I mean, obviously you didn't hear it at the time, right? You listened to it later, and then you have to reflect on where you were at or what was happening, and you hear your name.
With me, it's almost always curiosity. It's almost always fascination. I always tell people I'm terrified of heights. You'll never get me on a roller coaster. Being touched, seeing a ghost, something like that, that's my roller coaster ride. That's the same kind of rush, I think, that I get from that. So to me, it was fascination. I've never felt threatened. I've never felt scared. I know a lot of people who have. One of my longtime fellow guides, a couple of years ago, she said, I'm not coming back because of some things that she experienced that I hesitate to talk about because those are personal to her.
Right.
But no, to me, it was always fascination. And in that case, it was, again, the skeptic kicks in. Michael is a common name. It could have been, X, Y, and Z, but dang it, it makes a better story if I assume it was me. Right. But yeah, then I automatically go into, okay, who was it? If there was somebody there, and if they were even connected to that gas chamber, who was it, and why are they saying my name? As I recall, again, I haven't been able to listen to it for years, but there wasn't any context. It wasn't like somebody asked a question and my name was the answer or something that I could pinpoint. But to me, it's the same reason we all do it, right? We want to know more. Yeah.
Interesting. And I think that because you are there so much, they know who you are. So saying your name,
presumably, yeah.
Yeah. This past summer, we went 3 times, and by the end time, it was almost like they were recognizing, you know what I mean? They were like, these fools again. So, I mean, we kind of got some interaction. Yeah, I don't remember if you were with us on our last one, but it was interesting when we were reviewing or going through. It was almost like they recognized us and they recognized Eric, and they were, almost calling him out by name. So I found that kind of interesting. So maybe I'm wrong. We don't know. I have no idea.
We don't know, but it's safe. There are certain things that I think it's reasonable to assume. And if we assume they have intelligence, then it's reasonable to assume that they can remember certain things.
Sure.
But again,
especially if they see your face all the time.
Oh, yeah. I wonder how many of them are sick of my tours.
That's not this again.
Oh, he's telling the same story. Oh, he got that wrong. Yeah.
Yes. They'd be like, hey, if I got it wrong, tell me what I got wrong. I'd love to correct it.
I've used that on many a ghost hunt. Hey, this is what I heard. Tell me what it was actually like.
Exactly. So just out of curiosity, did you watch that clip I sent you early? Did you get a chance before we sat down?
I did. I got through the whole thing once, and I got I actually started closer to the middle the second time. Got about 1.5 views of it. Yeah. And now, was that in 19?
Yes.
Donnell's cell? Okay.
Yeah.
The night of these?
The night of the riot? That's what we were trying to talk about last weekend. You didn't seem like you wanted to give us any answers. Oh, cat ball behind Laura. Is that you, Walter?
He's picking it up.
What are we picking up? What'd you drop?
Turn.
Turn. Who touched that?
Church?
Who touched the ball behind Lora? Can you give us a first name or a nickname?
Hi.
Hi.
Can I ask him about it?
You can ask me whatever you want.
What do you want to know?
So I want to know why the autopsy after the riot said that you had a gunshot wound.
I visit.
Were you shot? Were you shot? Okay, ball again.
They have a radio.
We do have a radio. That's our way of communication with you.
And that is...
Because we can't see you all the time or hear you. So this helps us make out what you're saying to us.
I don't know about you.
Cat ball again behind Lora. There's definitely somebody behind her. What don't you know about me? Why do you think I'm not trustworthy? You can trust me. Damn, that cat ball's going crazy back there.
John?
Is that your name, John? Or is that the name of the man that shot Walter? Donnell. We just want to get the record straight.
Yes. So that's why I wanted to ask you, just because, you know, you've been there, and to have the ball going off behind me on that concrete. I mean, I don't know. I just found that really, you know what I mean? And especially when Eric asked, you know, twice, were you shot? So for those who don't know, we were talking about Walter Donnell, and I'm going to let you fill the folks in on the details of this and what we're talking about. And then we'll talk about that clip. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay, I'll try to keep this to less than an hour. Bullet points. Walter Donnell was the only inmate killed by other inmates in the September 1954 riot, the biggest riot at MSP. And the common narrative for years has been that inmates broke into death row to kill Donnell. My belief, and I'm not alone in this, but I'll say my belief, having delved into that event a couple of years ago for its 70th anniversary, is that yes, he was killed by other inmates. I don't believe that's why they broke into death row. And I know a lot of people, that's semantics, but to me, it's significant. If we're going to tell the history, let's get it right. So my belief is that, yes, he was killed by inmates. I don't think that's why they broke in there. And I think what you're getting at, so relative to your point, is what we've always heard is that he was stabbed and beaten and his fingers were broken and then his head was bashed in with a sledgehammer. It was, and I don't, maybe I had heard this and maybe I didn't, but it wasn't, my memory is that it wasn't until I was doing that research for the 70th anniversary and the podcast episode I wrote about it, that I noticed the newspaper articles and then took a closer look at the death certificate. The initial finding was that he had been shot to death. Now that would be potentially hugely significant because there's no accounts of any of the inmates having guns that night. No firsthand account, no newspaper articles, no law enforcement officials. Nobody ever says that any of the inmates had firearms that night. That doesn't rule out that if he had been shot, that doesn't rule out that one of them did hit it, blah, blah, blah. It's still possible, but it kind of points the finger at law enforcement. But my initial reaction then is, well, why would they have shot him? This guy had helped them. I don't, unless I mean, there are scenarios in which law enforcement would have done it. I'll just say it's not out of the question. But I'm inclined to believe, again, that he was stabbed, that his head was bashed in, etc., like we've always heard. And that's what the subsequent autopsy found when essentially his wife and kids, his wife heard that he had been shot and demanded the second autopsy, which was done in Memphis, where she lived and where he was from, done in Memphis, Tennessee. And that was where we get the findings of the beating and the broken fingers and the stabbings, etc. I know there's all kinds of ways to look at it and say, well, yeah, he could have been shot and they covered it up, or blah 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 blah.
Mm.
But after everything that I read and how it was, they went through that very extensively in the trial, and it's in the trial transcript for Ronnie Laster. So, I mean, they covered this. And I certainly came away with the opinion that, I mean, yeah, it's possible, but I don't think that's what happened. Now, why did they put that he was shot on the initial death certificate? No idea.
Mm.
I don't know why that would have been put. And you can even, if you look at it, if you pull it up right now on the Secretary of State's website, you can even see where that, gunshot wound or whatever has been crossed out. And then they wrote in the other findings. So I think that brings everybody up to speed then as to what we're talking
Yes.
about. Yeah.
Yes. So we were there last year, and we were there a couple of times with you. And I know that you had mentioned that you wanted to try to connect with him. And then, it was the last time we were there, actually. Eric and I were leading groups, and we decided that we would go off to that cell by ourselves and just to see, I would throw on the headphones and just to see if I could get any communication. So it's about a 13-minute clip, and I'm sitting there, and some of the things that I heard, I felt were kind of relevant, but the cat ball is going off behind me, and it goes off several times. And one of the times that it did is when Eric asks, "Were you shot?" And it goes off, and then it goes off again. And I could look at that two different ways, if it was a yes or if it was a no. You know what I mean? It could
Right.
be viewed both ways. But I did find that interesting. So what was your thoughts on some of the things that was being said or that I heard during the Estes?
Yeah, I did think it was interesting. It went off when it did, but I was like you, I'm not really sure. And I was
Mhm.
going to ask you tonight if you had established ahead of time, this many flashes is yes, this is no, whatever. But I did think it was interesting. It certainly, if I were Walter Lee Donnell, I think that I would be interested in, either yes, I was shot, and I want people to know that, and
Right.
the fact that you're asking me that, hey, yes, I'm keep
Yes.
on that line of questioning. Or he's going, what the heck are you talking about?
Exactly.
You
I know.
know?
What? They said what? Exactly. Yeah. So
And so,
I don't know. I found it interesting. And then when it comes through, and when I do my Estes, I always try to use the same voices and pronunciations that they do, just because I want people to, if they potentially recognize it, say, "Oh, they talk like this," or "They did this."
right,
So I
right.
thought it was funny when they said, "I have a radio," or "They have a radio," and I was like, I just found that I was like, that
Yeah.
sounds like something they would probably say. But there was a gentleman that I could not hear, and he was almost like I said, behind a wall or further away. And
Yeah.
that was the second time that I'd heard that when I was in that cell trying to communicate. So I found that one a little more like, And then when we go back again, because we're coming back again, surprise. I'm going to try it again and see if it's the same gentleman that sounds like he's behind a wall. And it makes me wonder if it's him, if he doesn't want to come, or if someone's keeping him from telling the story. So that's the way my mind works. But
And I don't know of any stories. I don't know of any stories offhand connected to the maintenance shaft that runs down behind those what do they call them, plumbing runs, or with some just call them the tunnels that run down behind the
tunnels.
backs of the
Hmm.
cells. And honestly, that was first thought when you talk about somebody being behind a wall, if there's
Yes.
somebody, that was one of the
Yes.
first experience. That actually is the story that I was trying to think of a minute ago when you asked me about my experiences at MSP. If you want one
Hmm.
more,
Yes. Absolutely.
3D, 3D is the unit below death row.
Hmm.
At least part of which was known as informally as O Hall, but I say informally, that's what nearly everybody called it. These were cells that several of us historians believe were left over from the 1852 B Hall that used to stand on that spot. It was torn down to make way for McClung Hall, the east wing of McClung Hall as we know it today, which is where the death row is, and all,
Hmm.
Donnell's cell. Part of the reason we think that is those cells up until, I'm told, the 1980s were only about 4 foot wide, which is what the size of the cells at MSP were for about 30 or 40 years in the mid to late 1880s. They were made 4 by 7 and about 7 to 8 feet tall. And those cells at some point were repurposed to cells that are about twice that, a little more than twice that width, but there's one standout that is still the original dimensions. Anyway, again, I'm sidetracking myself. We did
Your
not
passion
have,
showing.
yeah, we didn't have access to that unit for the first 2 or 3 years that I was a guide at MSP. We weren't allowed down there. It was locked off. But
Really?
man, we heard things down there. You'd hear bangs, you'd hear
Mm-hmm.
growls, you'd hear, every once in a while you'd hear what sounded like somebody talking down there. So one night, and I think
You heard growls down there?
yeah, back when we couldn't go down there, and not frequently, but enough to, certainly we wanted to get, we wanted to check it out.
Well, yeah. Why?
Um,
How come you guys weren't allowed? I'm sorry. How come you weren't allowed down there in the beginning? Come
I
it took
don't
so
know
long?
if it was. I don't know what the state. So the state of Missouri still owns the property, and it's the
Right.
the Office of Administration dictates where we can and can't go. We're not
Mhm.
always given explanations as to yes, you can go here. Why we can in some places and
Understood.
not others. All I knew was it was that door was locked and we couldn't go down there.
Got it.
And
Okay.
of course,
Sorry for
by
the
the time
sidetrack.
no, that's all right. And of course, by the time we did go down there, I didn't see anything that struck me as unsafe, but it may have been remediated by that. I have no idea. So
Tell us
one night, and
the story.
I think you've met Lisa Barrett, one of the other ghost
Yes. Love
guides.
Lisa. Yes.
Yes, she was my assistant on a ghost tour one night when we got a call or a text or something saying, "Hey, we now have access to that unit." And so,
Mm.
of course, as soon as she and I finished my tour, we went back up from the
Mhm.
gas chamber. We got our recorders and we went down there.
Yeah.
And now, again, talking about that maintenance tunnel, it runs down between the backs of the
Mhm.
cells in most of the buildings there. At the time, the door to that was unlocked. Today it's locked, and I will say, I mean, there's particulate matter coming off the ceiling. I have no idea what's in it. So for that alone, I think people shouldn't be back there breathing it in. But she and I that night we went back there, and we were standing about maybe 20 feet down, the equivalent of about maybe 3 cells in from the end, standing about only 6 or 7 feet apart. And coming back to your story about a guy behind a wall, she and I, with our own ears and our recorders caught it, heard what sounded like a guy with a hand over his mouth, like
Muffled.
like somebody was gagging him or muffling him. And it sounded like it was right there between us. And I will
Wow.
never forget. That was one of the most striking things I've ever heard there.
That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, it was a little disconcerting. I'm not gonna lie. Again, my default is fascination, but that one was pretty. If any of them that I've experienced were upsetting, that was it.
One of them. So, do you think it's because you guys were some of the first down there? I mean, to actually get in there?
Maybe, and that would lend itself to the urgency in what we heard. I mean, this sounded like somebody
Mhm.
who was desperate to get someone's attention, desperate to talk, and
Mhm.
was being restrained from doing it, like physically. So that's possible.
It makes me wonder too, when the tornado came through and AHA lost its roof, did you notice a difference in activity with that? I mean, when that happened?
I can't. That's one thing I can't say that I noticed a difference in activity. I'm trying to think. The experiences that I had once I transitioned to days, you just maybe notice less. Because
Mm.
I think everybody's, you and I think would be in agreement that they're there 24/7. They don't only come out at night. They come out when they want to, if they want to.
If they want to, that's right.
But I will say that my perception of activity has decreased significantly since I've been on the day tours. I haven't had nearly the number of experiences that I used to have. Now I know the obvious explanation for that is I'm not standing around in the dark and my senses aren't heightened,
Senses.
and that's fair for any skeptics hearing me talk, and that's their conclusion. That's a fair conclusion. I will say that I'm
Right.
quick to, like you said earlier, I'm quick to dismiss anything that I feel like I can write off and right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's part of our job.
yeah, right. But back to your original question, I don't have as good a sense since I've been in the history tours of some of the paranormal aspects, except when I'm talking to some of my fellow guides, and I do, I still love to hear what's been going on lately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What areas did you get this in?
Right.
There were
Yeah.
some great photos caught last year, I think,
Hmm.
at the beginning of the season with that. inmate with its coming. Yeah, that one kind of blew me away a little bit. And I'm
You're
like,
talking
wow.
about in H Hall, one house.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I was just like, why can't I ever capture something like that? It's
Oh, I
probably because
know.
I'm too
Oh, I
busy
know.
talking.
Yeah, I'm sure that's my problem.
Too busy on something else. So the very first time it wasn't this past year with us, but when you've done all of the history tours, and then when you got to go do another paranormal tour, what was it like for you? Was it just like putting on a pair of old shoes?
Oh man, it made me want to do it again all the time. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed that, and enjoy just being in that on that site at night is it really does feel like a different place between day and night. I mean, I know that I always tell people, I know that sounds like such an obvious statement, but when you experience the difference, it really is stark. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you'll think you're in a totally different location, but that and the energy of ghost groups is just different, and some of them obviously are just there for a good time, right? Hey, this is just something
Right.
fun to do on date night or whatever, but it's just a different energy, and you'll love the energy of a history tour too, especially with a good interested group of folks. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just a different kind of energy, and you
It
can
is.
feel it from the guests, let alone from the site.
I think it's
I think the site responds to it too. I
It
really do.
does. It does. It's that awe and that wonder.
Mm.
I remember the first time walking through there. I'll never forget that. I mean, that's a feeling that it's, overwhelmed with just, oh my gosh, I don't know where to look. I'll never forget
Mm.
that. And then seeing it in the daytime again, I was like, I haven't seen this before and I haven't seen this before. And that's why every time I go, I see something I haven't seen before. So I'm jealous because you get to be there and you get to see these things. But I know to you, it's probably just common now. Like oh yes, this is here, this is here. But for folks like me who don't get to spend their time there, it's like, dang it. I'm so jealous. I'm telling you, if I could do that, I'd be in heaven. I think I really would. Just because I love both sides of it. I love the paranormal and I love the history. It's been both. So dream job someday, it's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah, yeah. If
I'll
you
get
want
there.
you move or make the commute, I don't know, but
I asked, and I don't live close
I could
enough.
see that.
I
I could see that working
Yeah,
out. Never
I
say
want
never.
to though. I know that's true.
You
I'm
know a
just
guy.
saying, I do know a guy, and I would be more than thrilled to come help do that. That would be awesome. So, speaking of, okay, so you've done this, you've done the history, you've done the paranormal. What made you say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to do a podcast. I want to start a podcast.
You know what I think it was, as much as anything, if I'm honest, I think it was the frustration of not being able to tell the long form stories in a 2 hour long tour. There's so many details that I love to tell people, and I especially love those little nuggets that make the person go,
Mm-hmm.
wow,
Mm-hmm.
those moments of disbelief that truth is stranger than fiction. And when you're researching history, you see the evidence of that over and over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. Those are the things I love to throw in, and you can't tell everybody everything you want to tell them in a 2 or 3 hour tour. And the truth of the matter is, yeah, it's a true crime podcast, but what I really wanted to do is a history podcast. I just didn't think people would listen to that. I figured if I stuck true crime on it, it would draw more because that's what's popular right now.
Well, that's
But
true.
but
That's
but
true.
it's very history heavy, and that's really why I wanted to do it. The stories are fascinating. I mean,
Mm,
there's a certain extent where you just feel like they tell themselves. They just need a medium.
mm-hmm.
They need somebody to
Mm-hmm.
in so much. I mean, a lot of that information is just out there. You just have to take the time to go get it and put it together.
Right. It's just easier to listen to you tell us.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I'd say that. It's not like I've made a dime off of this, but I'm happy to be
Um,
the one to keep doing it. Um, if everybody did this, I wouldn't have nearly. If everybody did this, I wouldn't have as much fun.
well, see, I get it. So, out of all of the ones that you've done, what has been your most favorite podcast
I,
story?
they're all my baby.
Mm.
And I was going to, this maybe is a good way to bring this up because tomorrow is I'm going to do the math here, third anniversary of the Randolph Tavern fire,
Oh, that's right. Oh, you're right. It is.
1968. Tomorrow's the
Yes.
anniversary. And,
Yes.
there's that one. And I get emotional, when you were there when I did the live
Mm-hmm.
reading of that in Moberly a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago. I didn't know until about 30 minutes before I arrived in Moberly that one of the victims' family members was going to be there, or the family of one of the victims was going to be there, and that was a whole different kind of weight when I learned
Mm-hmm.
that they were going to be there. Boy, you want to get you want to do that. You want to do right by them, you know?
Yes.
I think that's the first time that I've gotten to see most of the cases I write about happened, in the 1800s,
Yeah.
early 90s. Honestly, a lot of those are easier to research than the stuff that's more contemporary. But I did the Moberly case because I'd grown up 2 blocks from where that happened, never heard about it until I was in my 20s. Nobody ever talked
Mm-hmm.
about that case. And I thought, how can that be possible? That, this, for better or worse, is part of it. Would be like West Plains not talking about the dance hall explosion. It'd be like Bath, Michigan not talking about the massacre that killed
Mm-hmm.
38 children, you know, and that was the impression I got when I started digging into it a little bit. Is it was covered
Mm-hmm.
up. People didn't want people, and so my gut reaction is always, it's history. Why are we hiding history?
Mm-hmm.
But then I find out that there's a domestic violence component to it. This essentially what happened because he was abusing his wife and she was trying to get away from him, and he at least thought the people in that bar were
Mm-hmm.
helping her stay away, and I believe some of them were, if not most of them. So that made it more compelling. Like, this is a story that needs to be told, and these 12 victims need to be remembered. So that one is very dear to me, not only because it's from my hometown, but because I've seen firsthand what it meant to at least one of the families,
Mm-hmm.
that somebody finally told that story in such a way that didn't reflect poorly on their loved one. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I wish I could get more of the families to come and talk to me, because I really want to take the next step and turn that into a book. And so if anybody seeing this knows one of those families, please let them know that I'd like to at least sit down and have dinner with them and tell them what I want to do. The other one that always really got to me was the Edward Soper case, partly because prior to sitting down to write that one, it might have been a month before I started researching it that I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of this guy. And he was essentially a serial killer from Missouri who, to my knowledge, was not widely known. So of course my interest was piqued, but the fact that 3 of his victims were his own children, that gets to me. And I think part of the reason that case still haunts me is I like to go visit the graves of the people I've written about. There's just something that I feel, I'm honestly the kind of guy that people take this how they will, but I don't think people are at their graves once they pass. I think they've moved on to somewhere. I hope they're not trapped there in that space in the ground, whatever. I think those graves are there for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel the importance of paying my respects. And the cemetery where Soper's wife and 2 children who he killed in Archie, Missouri, that cemetery, the last that I've been able to ascertain, the headstones were bulldozed into a creek, and no one's sure if the bodies are still there or not. And it's bugged me all these years that I want to go visit their, of all people, those 2 kids. I want them to feel remembered, and
Right.
whether they know it or not, I want to make that effort. So that's one that's always haunted me. And I'm working with some now that, I'm trying to get more episodes written. I really am. But there's some that just have a personal impact. I didn't anticipate this when I started doing the podcast, that these stories carry. I have a lot of
Wait.
empathy. I have a lot of empathy for the people and the families, and even those, 2 or 3 generations later, who still know that story's in their family's history.
Mm-hmm.
And I really leaned into that after the first couple episodes that I wrote. I really leaned into that, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes it more meaningful for me, and I think it makes it more meaningful for the people who listen.
I would absolutely agree. I know when I listen, it's like I'm captivated because you're telling the story and I could see it playing out in my head. And it's kind of like reading when I read my books, the ones that really get me. I see the whole thing. It's like it's in front of me just playing out. And that's why I love that. I love your podcast because it tells that, all the details, and yeah, it's like a movie. But you're just telling us this movie, and it's wonderful. Back to when you came and spoke, and the family was there. You could feel the emotion in the air, and I cried with you for a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. Um, But no, I thought it was fantastic. You did an amazing job, and you definitely honored them very well. And I saw them give you big hugs afterwards. And yeah, no, that's a very special moment. So, and I also 100% agree with you. I think there should be a memorial there. And like you, I did not know that story until I was in my 20s, and I was actually working there at City Hall. And that's the only reason I even heard about it, is because I was working in City Hall. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Because they, of course, have, the archives there in the back, and I'm like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
And then I learned about what happened, and then the paranormal side of me kicked in, and I'm like, "Maybe I should bring a recorder here," because obviously City Hall sits on that site.
Right.
And I did actually one night. I left a recorder running in the vault, there overnight, but I didn't get anything, so
Yeah.
but I just thought, "What if?" You know? And then, like you, I also think that those people should be honored, should be remembered. And that is another reason why I do what I do, is for that very reason, is to tell the history. And by doing that, I'm honoring them and remembering them.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah. People,
kudos to you.
it's not all just about an adrenaline rush, is it? It's
No.
these are people,
Yes,
and if in a way, I'm kind of glad you didn't get anything at City
I
Hall
know.
that night, because
I know.
somebody asked me this the other day, how, because they were kind of getting into the, are you being respectful to people,
Mm,
and they posed me
mm-hmm,
this hypothetical: would you do a ghost hunt at Ground Zero? We think about the emotional, what that site and what those days mean to Americans who were alive at the time. And those are the kind of questions I think we need to be asking ourselves if we're going to be doing these paranormal investigations, to keep us honest, to keep the empathy for, yeah, these are people we're talking to, or at
mm-hmm,
least we hope they are.
mm-hmm.
you know we want to be guarded against something else, but who we're trying to talk to, we believe, are people.
Exactly. So you don't have to answer, but I'm going to tell you, my gut reaction to that would have been absolutely, because what if they have a story they want to tell? What if they have something, a message?
What if what if they are trapped there?
Yes.
God, God knows, I hope they're not. But if they
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
what kind of torture would that be, to be trapped in a spot and no one knows you're there?
Exactly. Exactly. So what if someone can help them? What if they just say what they want to say, or reach out, and then, so yeah,
Now,
I would. I would. I don't know about
I
you,
say
but
that, would I make an episode out of it? Would I publish?
uh
Probably not.
no.
There are certain ones that need to be handled a certain way.
Agreed. Yes. There are ones that we do that we don't put anything out on, just for respect and privacy, just
Right.
because some things are just, it's meant to be kept that way. So I heard you say you're working on some episodes. You and I was trying to pick your brain a little bit last year. Have you settled on one? Just, you don't have to
I've
tell us what it is.
I settled on, there's two that I want to get done as soon as possible, and both of them have to do with MSP. I really didn't want this to
Hmm.
become an MSP podcast, because I wanted to be able to. Not that there would be something wrong with that. That's just not what I wanted this to be. But hey, with what I do, and I mean, if it's a crime that happened in Missouri, chances are it's going to have a connection to that place.
That's
So
true.
these are two very, very MSP heavy episodes, or related episodes. And I've also, now this is, I haven't talked about this in a public format or on any of the social media yet, but I sat down, was it late October, for the first time maybe, with, was it 6 people, who each on their own in the span of about 3 weeks came to me and said, can I help you? Can I help you do the research? Can I help you do this? Can I, one guy wanted to help with some of the social media and the setting up events and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. My God, please take my hands. I'm terrible at promoting myself. I'm terrible at getting my social media updated, blah, blah, blah. So I tentatively have, I want to say it's 5 other people who want to help me research, if only to do the digging and bring me the material. And one person who's interested in scheduling some public events and doing some of the social media managing, and maybe even some t-shirts. I can't believe I'm saying that,
Ooh.
but stuff like that. So, this is now, several of us work in the Capitol like I do, and this is our busy time of year. So, and for all of us, it's just like the way I've treated it. It's a side project. We'll get to it when we can. So I don't like to set artificial deadlines, but I'm optimistic that by the end of this year, we might see Show Me Murder episodes rolling out with more frequency than, I mean, I know I haven't put one out in more than a year, and that bugs me as much as anybody. But the good news is I think I've got some folks who are going to help me get
Yeah.
some of that rolling faster. And I can't tell you how touched I am that anybody wants to be a part of that. And that people are fans of it like you are, and then people stop
Mhm.
me and ask me about it. It's like for anybody that's ever played music on a stage, and when you can
Mm.
feel yourself connecting with that audience. I've had the privilege of getting
Mhm.
to do that a couple of times. It's the same. It's when you're connecting with somebody whom
Mhm.
you might not know outside of that moment, and that's a special feeling. And
That
so
is.
when people like you tell me that you're fans of the show and you enjoy it, and that it speaks to you,
Mhm.
and for people to want to be a part of it, I'm so flattered. I really am.
Take your flowers. Take your flowers. You deserve.
Exactly.
So
Oh,
I have to know, you're talking about the MSC. You actually got to sit down and interview inmates. And what was that like? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'd be so nervous, but I don't know.
right.
What did you do to prepare to sit down and actually interview an inmate?
And that so I kind of drew from experience in my Missouri Net days. When I was at Missouri Net, I did one thing we had to do for, people have strong opinions about this, but as an agency that covers statewide news, we saw it as our duty to cover executions. And
Mm.
I witnessed 8 executions. That was my first experience entering operational correctional centers. Nine executions, I should say. That was my first experience with that. It's interesting. I can't remember at this moment. You'd think this would stick with you. The first time I actually spoke to someone who's still incarcerated, I can't remember now if that was while I was with Missouri Net, but then I started, it was kind of drawing from that experience that I started saying, why don't I go talk to some of these guys who were at
Yeah.
MSP who are still around?
Yes.
And some of them have fascinating stories to tell, but somewhere along the line, it occurred to me that they're just people.
Mm.
And that is a hard statement for a lot of people to accept because some of these guys have done things that I will never excuse, condone, minimize. Um, and I mean, some of the offenses that we as a society are angered by the most.
Mm.
But
'Cause
if
you have
you're
to push all
going,
that past,
you have to
right?
you have to be able to sit down and talk to these folks. And some of them, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say that I connect with them. I don't want to say that but they're just people. And some of them, you realize I better not turn my back on you.
Mm.
But
That's the
I
part I
think
was trying to get to.
right, right, and we as a society think that they're all like that, right?
You know.
I had an interesting experience here, first in November, and again just a few weeks ago. People think this is a crazy idea, but I have to say, with my knowledge of the history of MSP, it made sense to me the first time I heard it. They wanted, back in 2022, they had a bill. They wanted to put a nursery in the women's prison in Vandalia. Now, me knowing my history of MSP, most people, oh, this is crazy. You wouldn't put babies in a prison. But I knew that there have been babies in MSP as far back as
Mhm.
1843 and in the 1850s and 70s. Multiple times in its history did a woman have a baby in that prison with her. And it was often just in her cell, often in,
Mhm.
the first one was in an unheated cell. They didn't give her
Mm.
additional clothes for the baby. I don't know how she kept that child alive.
Mm.
So my first reaction was, that's a great idea.
Mhm.
It's got to be better than what we've done. And the more I learned about it, I had the chance to go visit that nursery once in November and again in December. Then here again, you're sitting across the table from women who are incarcerated, and granted, none of them have committed violent crimes. They're not, there's no murder, there's no offenses against kids. But it's the same mentality that you're just sitting across the table from a person. And just like I talk to you, if you came at me with some level of disrespect or a chip on your shoulder, I'm going to recognize that, and I'm going to
Mm.
change my behavior accordingly. It's the same thing in those settings. But I tried to explain this to a group the other day, that you learn a different sense of empathy than you ever knew you were capable of, or at least I have. I'm sure some people wouldn't. But you know, again, some of these guys, I wouldn't ever let them out. I wouldn't ever excuse what they've done. I think they're where they need to be in some cases. but they are still just people, and I can sit down and have a conversation with them, and even have lunch with them if I had the opportunity, and I'm okay with it. Never, if you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago would I be able to do that, I think I'd be like most people. When somebody gets put behind those bars, put in one of those buildings, we by and large forget about them.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the unexpected things of that nursery, is the response that it's getting is largely because you have these women telling their stories, women who never knew anything from childhood but drug addiction, but domestic violence, but sex abuse. And if that was my background, where would I be?
Exactly.
And so those are for people to get to. Yeah, they open the story because, oh, this is a nursery, and they want to hear about the nursery, but then they learn a little bit about, these are people and this is what they've experienced, and I think that's beautiful.
Mm.
So, I wouldn't ever, like I said, some of these guys are exactly where they need to be, but it's a point of pride for me. It has become a point of pride
Mm-hmm.
for me that I can sit down with these guys and that they'll have a conversation with me.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, absolutely. I commend you for that. I can tell that with what your career and what you've been gifted, the amount of growth, you know what I mean, that you see in yourself,
Oh yeah.
it's tremendous. And I think I kind of see that in the paranormal too. Like, in the beginning, it's for fun. It's for, hopefully catch this. But once you start digging into the history and start learning the stories, then you have this respect. So I can see where you're coming from 100% with that.
Yeah.
So I
It
won't keep
takes
you
a
much
certain
longer.
amount of self-awareness, which I don't like
Yes.
to sound like I'm bragging, but I think
Yes.
somewhere along the way I stumbled into it.
It was naturally. You stumbled into it naturally. You do it with ease. So I know, before I let you go too, my coworker and I and some of our teammates, we always talk about listening to your talk and the way you say being. I can't say it because it's so unique. So tell me, did you always say it like that, or did
Nope.
how did you coin this? How did it come from? Where did it come from? I gotta know.
I nitpick the snot out of other speakers when I listen to other podcasts and their regional pronunciations and this and that and the other. And when I caught myself one day talking about where I had been, I have been, and I thought, what are you doing? That's not how that word is spelled. It's like, and I know other people who say bin. It's like, that's way off. So I deliberately forced myself to start saying bean, and I still slip up sometimes, but that's why I say it that way, because it feels more right to me.
To you,
I
it is so
thought
unique.
if I'm gonna hold these other speakers accountable in my own mind, why am I not doing it to myself? So I
To
try to
yourself.
correct these little, in my mind, mispronunciations where I can, and that's exactly what happened with that. That's only been about 3 or 4 years ago. I don't think I started that until after the first couple episodes of the podcast. You can
Podcast.
probably pick up when I started doing it.
Well, I love it. It's so unique, and that's how it makes you stand out. So that's for sure. So don't stop doing it. We love it. So, all right. Well, I think
I mean, I
we've
guess I've
covered
been doing
everything.
it this long, so.
Don't stop now. I am looking forward to this year coming to MSP. We're coming May and June,
Okay.
and I'm going to work a little more on that cell. Just so you know, I'm not giving up. It's
Well,
got some
and you and I talked about this. I'm still trying to find out what happened to Walter Donnell's
his
children.
children.
That was that promise I made to him the first night I tried to,
Mhm.
when I knew what cell we'd been in the wrong cell for years. But that was something I told him, is I'm going to try and find out what happened to your son and daughter. And I'm still trying to
Mhm.
find that out. But I
Mhm.
found some new information here recently that might help me
Oh,
progress in that quest. So, and I'm sure you and I'll probably work together on that, because I know you're interested
I hope
too.
so. I am. I have the names June and Scoopy. I just know I know that's what they were, and that the tattoo said June and Scoopy. Like, because Eric was even talking about it the other day. He's like, "What was those names?" And I'm like, "June and Scoopy." Some
And
things
there
just
again,
stick
I
with
mean,
you.
and I think, where did I get that detail? I think I came out of one of the trial but
You did, yeah.
those are the details that I just love. Those are the things that
Mm-hmm.
you don't always
Mm-hmm.
find
No,
in all the
you
other.
gotta. I just latch on to 'em when I have them too.
Yeah.
Those are the little nuggets that I look for, like the little things.
Yep.
So, all right. So let's wrap up MSP. Tell me one thing that gets kind of grinds your gears. That is a had been, kind of like a folklore, been told for years, but it's not really true. And I'll leave it on that. So you tell me one thing.
Time magazine never printed the phrase bloodiest 47 acres in America.
Seriously.
Several researchers and I'm a nitpicker for the details, and we'd heard that for years. And so several researchers and I actually went through 2 different online archives of Time magazine, starting at the time of the riot, 1954, and we went through, I think one of them went as far as 4 decades out, and never found that phrase.
Wow.
That phrase was originated by a magazine called Guy Magazine, which I always tell my guests, think of what kind of magazine would be popular to a bunch of male prison inmates in the 1950s and 60s. That kind of magazine. It wasn't just pornographic, but it was also, noir and crime stories and stuff. That's where that phrase originated. And I don't mean to be rude, but I'm trying to pull up a picture on my phone here. And I know this too, because now Mark Schreiber, who we just lost, this was his copy of that magazine.
Oh, wow.
And that's where that phrase originated. But because it's one of those things that has been regurgitated. So, our tours have said it for years. I used to say it. And if you search online right now, every article you read is going to say Time magazine called
Time magazine.
But it didn't.
Bloodiest 47. Wow. Okay, well, see, I didn't even know that one, so I appreciate that. That's huh. Now it makes me not want to say it, and that's
you
a whole
can
other
say it,
story.
just don't say it was time. It was.
It 100% was. So, okay. Well, now I'm gonna have to share that with Eric too. See, now I feel educated. If you were supposed to learn at least one thing a day, I just learned. So thank you for that. All right, Mike, I appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me and
anytime
teaching me, continuing to teach me. I love it. So definitely reach out to me. I'm always willing to help you.
Yep,
and
same.
any of your endeavors. So
hope to see you in prison soon.
I know things you would never say. All right. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you, Laura.
Bye. Thank you.